So let's continue. For the other options, let's move on to feedback types. And normally we just leave this one as the default. Let's move on to submission settings. These are the default settings. The first option is require students to click the submit button. So by default, the setting is no. But if you change this one to yes, the students can no longer edit the submission once submit button is clicked and confirmed. So while there's still time, if the setting here is no, and while the cutoff date or the due date is not yet but it's not yet the cutoff date and the due date, the student can still make changes to his or her assignment. So that's why we normally leave this one as no. The second option is that the students require that the students accept the submission statement, and this has to do with the statement that he acknowledges or he or she acknowledges the use of the work of other people. So we don't normally change the setting here. And then the attempts reopened is this one determines how a student's submission is reopened. This one is also normally just left at the default. Now, the next setting is on group submission settings, and since we don't do group submissions for this training, or rather we assume that they will not be submitting in groups because they don't have internet connection or they have challenges in their internet connection, then we leave this one as no, and then also leave the settings under notifications as is. The grade is here that we can specify how the grade is going to be specified, and we normally leave this one as point. So that means this is, for example, worth 100 points. Now, so if you feel or if you want to set this particular assignment as worth 20 points, then this is where you change this to 20 points. You can also specify the grade to pass and just leave the other settings as is. Now, there are other settings here that also are left at the default, such as the ID number, the group mode. We don't do group activities. We have restrictions, activity completion. Kindly leave this one as is. So here, if the completion tracking is that the students can manually mark the activity as completed, that's the default setting. But you also can change the setting here to show activity as complete when conditions are met, meaning if a student is able to submit the assignment, then automatically this would be marked as complete. So if you remember, during our first activity here in this training, if you are able to introduce yourself and are able to also comment or reply to any of the posts of the other participants, then that particular activity is marked complete. So this is what we actually did. Now, so say for example, students must view this activity to complete it. students must receive a grade to complete this activity. So you can actually toggle this if you want to now, or you can manually mark, or the students can manually mark the activity as completed. So that means that for this particular activity, if you leave this one as is, once the student submits an assignment, then he or she will have to tag it as completed, and that's also a possibility. Or you can also automatically complete this or assume that it is completed on this particular date. So what happens here is that say you either trust your students, or like regardless of whether they have submitted this or not, they can proceed to the next activities of your course. Then you can specify here a date. It's like an estimated date, and just leave the other settings as is. And once you're done, you just mark or just save this assignment and display. So what's the difference between save and return to course and save and display? If you select save and display, it will be shown on your screen like this. Now, if after saving the settings and you select save and return to course, then you will go back to your course and you may be able to submit or to post other learning activities. So at this point, I'd like you to do the other settings that I have just discussed. I suggest that since you have already specified the submission type, kindly also change the submission settings. Perhaps you want to try what happens if you change this one to yes, although we normally set this as no, so that students can still make changes to their assignment while it's not yet the due date. It's really up to you. Or you can also set the activity completion options. So at this point, I'd like you to come up with your own assignment. At this point, assume that you're going to expect a file to be uploaded on the PLMS, and we will discuss the settings of the online course in a little while.